housing.
Okay.
Right. So there needs to be they need to be incentivized, right? Real estate developers need to be incentivized if we're really going to have if we're really going to bridge the gap in the housing.
For that analysis. So now let's look at the main focus, right, for our conversation. What are the impacts of the Land Use Act in solving Nigerians' housing deficit? I mean, there's an act somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay. And like you earlier stated while you were giving us, you know, a brief, should I say, definition of what the Land Use Act is, you clearly stated the purpose and the reason why it was enacted in the first place. So let's hear your thoughts on that.
Can you come again, please?
Sorry, you're
Exact
lost,
question.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, so let's hear your thought on what are the impacts of the Land Use Act in solving Nigerians' housing deficit.
Like I earlier said, right, the Land Use Act has served its purpose. We need a revision to that, right? If we're going to bridge the housing issue in Nigeria, right, we need a revision to it.
Okay.
Currently, the Land Use Act concentrates power concerning any land in Nigeria in government, right? And that way we're unable to unlock capital, right? Banks are not willing to fund certain investments as it relates to housing and real estate. I'm not saying they don't fund it, right? It's just been difficult. It's been extra layer of KYC and all of this, which could impact the business of the developers, right? So I think they need to reduce the power, right? Concentrated with governors, especially because, for example, now say you want to sell this property, right? You want to sell it to me, you need to get governor's consent. And for FCT, and that's the Minister of FCT's consent to be able to. I mean, that could delay the transaction, right? It could hamper capital. Real investors are not willing to probably come into the country and put money down, knowing fully well that you don't know when exactly your consent is going to be approved for you to be able to transfer title or right in this property.
But don't you think that being that is a land-related matter, because over the years we have, you know, come to understand that land issue is not just a trivial issue, you know. There are processes you go through. So don't you think that because this issue is something that has been, you know, polluted over time with fraudsters, with, you know, people that are just trying to get people's money and just take it away without actually giving them value for their money, don't you think all of those processes are really, you know, a good one in place to checkmate? Because you actually spoke about regulation.
Yes, well, like I said, it has served its purpose, right? And this checkmate, like you said, we still see a few of these fraudsters.
We still do very well.
Yes, exactly, right? So it's at this point in time you gather stakeholders together.
Okay.
We're able to identify the loopholes in the Land Use Act. We're able to identify the loopholes in the implementation, right? Ongoing, which has not seen to the total elimination of these fraudsters, all these challenges, right? That's, I mean, they've reduced, but they are still there. So let us sit, let us have a round table, let us identify loopholes, right? Let us close up these loopholes and let us open up land, let us open up capital in Nigeria. That way, we're able to bridge the housing deficit in Nigeria.
So now you're specifically saying that financing is a major problem.
It's part of the problem, right?
Okay.
It's part of the problem, right? But the act itself, right, like I said, is obsolete, right? So, for example, governor can revoke your COO, right? And if I can remember correctly, what it is for the good, for the good people of Nigeria, or for a good use, right? Which can be subjective, huh? Governor can wake up tomorrow and say, okay, I'm revoking the title to this property, right? Why? Because we're a fraudster ran into the building, or the person who owns it is a fraudster. Obviously, that's not what they're going to tell you, right? Maybe that's what he would tell the public, but the governor likes the land and he needs it.
But there's still a law in that same Land Use Act that calls for compensations.
To be determined by the government.
Sure.
right? Which is another big problem to be determined by the government, right? How does the government determine what is a fair amount or fair compensation to
To be
me,
given.
right? How exactly will they determine that? This should be left to, say, probably the court or to tribunal,
Okay.
right, to determine what is a fair compensation to
Okay.
somebody, right?
Okay.
And also, you should also know that if you do not have a C of O, they won't compensate you, right? And for example, for people who have, the way it has been ongoing, is sold the property and they've not been unable to get a C of O, what will happen to them? I paid for this property, right? But I have not been able to process my C of O. Now, something has come up and the government needs my land. So how do I get compensated for that? So these are the laws, these are the areas we think need revision, right? Let it catch up with modern day reality.
True that. Okay, so let's look at, in your own view, what do you think are the measures that are meant to be in place, or rather implemented, in addressing housing deficit?
Like I said, right, one example, right, is to take away the power or the provision that says the governor must give consent, right, before you transfer title or you alienate your title. Say you want to transfer title to me by selling, leasing, the government must give consent. I think we should dispense with that, right?
Okay.
Maybe have an agency, right, instead of the governor. Maybe have an agency who looks into all of this, who is able to review your documents, review the transaction, and then give an approval to it as against the governor, right? That's one, right? Maybe entirely it could be like CBN currently operates with dollar, right? The window where you need dollars, you approach me, I sell it to you. Simple. No middleman or nothing, right? Maybe we can have that. I want to sell this land, right? I want to transfer my title to someone else to do whatever they want to do with it. That's one, for example. I also think we already have the Nigerian, we have the mortgage financing house, right? But I think a lot of people do not know about it, right? Or the whole process of getting funds from there is too complex. That it should be simplified, right? I think they are trying, but it should be further simplified so that different set of people in the society, not just, I know it's not just people who have structured salary who can now approach, different set of people, but it should be further simplified. Say, for example, people in Ilaro, do they know about this Federal Mortgage Bank, right? I mean, there are teachers in Ilaro who want to build houses, right? They should know about it, right? There should be a proper dissemination. Okay, this institution exists. This is what they do for you. This is how they can help you, right? Let them touchlight what they do to the nooks and crannies of Nigeria. Financing is another thing. As long as power, absolute power in land is concentrated in the governor, right, we may not be able to get the kind of investment we need to be able to close.
But we have housing corporations in virtually all of the states.
Are they functional?
Well, I know of some few that are functional.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so what they will probably do is to also inefficiency in all of these housing corporations comes to place as well, right? Do they know what to do to be able to harness resources together? What exactly are they telling people? Oh, let us open up new spaces. Let us open up new lands, right? So that people can come, we can apply for it, allocate land to them, let them build, right? Also, there should be probably regulation guidelines saying, for this particular zone, these are the kind of properties you can build, and these are the kind of people we are looking to be able to come into this property to live. Like they have in the US, they have in the UK, right? There are certain properties that are designated to the people who do not have access or who do not have enough money. And I mean, to a large extent, right, they suffer housing issue, but you cannot compare to what we currently have in Nigeria. Currently in Nigeria, there's nothing or no provision or infrastructure that is currently in place. I mean, government must have said they put some things in place, right? But that we say currently that somebody, low-income earners, can go to get housing or accommodation. There's nothing currently in place, right? Now, government builds house and they are selling for 20, 30, 40 million naira. How can the person in the market selling tomatoes, they make money, right? But how can such person be able to afford this 30, 40, 50, 70 million naira housing?
On that note, this brings me to my next question. Considering the fact that we're in another era, like you said, governance is a continuous process. This administration, so far, I would say that with the separation of the Ministry of Housing from Works, it means that, okay, we're going somewhere, yeah, and then we now have a Minister for Housing that is in the built environment, that has, you know, the, should I use the word, the expertise, the experience, and the exposure to be able to help Nigerians in solving the housing deficit. With the creation of the Renewed Hope Cities and Estates by President Bola Tinubu's administration, which is virtually in all of the states in Nigeria, some states have kick-started. We know that of Abuja in Karsana, the project has started, and some other few states. Now, would you say that this present-day administration will be capable enough to solve Nigerians' housing deficit? Maybe I should just put you on the spot for a little. Let's hear your thoughts on that.
Well, so let me start from when you started with separated Ministry of Housing from Works, right? Prior to the coming of former President Muhammadu Buhari, right? This has always been separate ministries, right? But like they call him, the star boy of the administration, which is His Excellency Raji Babatunde Fashola, right? He under his belt, right, it was in Works, Housing and Power, right? So, well, I'm not sure exactly what President Buhari saw in him to give him that, right? But yeah, if you looked around most states in Nigeria, at least the few states I was in when the past administration was, there was something going on, right? Even before this advent of Renewed Hope Estates, there was something, and it's been like that for most of the administrations, right? But most time what you see is they start these projects, they don't complete them, right? Or when they completed it, the quote and unquote, the issues we have in Nigeria, plaguing Nigeria, comes into place when it comes to allocation. So it does not get to the people who truly deserve accommodation. Well, I don't know to the extent what the current administration is going on, but I have heard of the Renewed Hope Estates. I know, I think the most popular one currently is the one in Ogun State. There was a groundbreaking ceremony for that, right? Except the people who truly need accommodation, who truly need this housing, gets it. Well, I don't think the impact will be felt. Why am I saying that, right? So a permanent secretary currently will probably have a house on a minimum one, right, where he's currently living, right? Now when you finish and then you are now allocating another one to the same permanent secretary, you are allocating to his wife, you are allocating to his kids, right? And these people just lock it up, do nothing with it. There are loads of properties in Abuja that are locked up, right? I mean, regardless of whatever the administration, the money they pump into it, right? If the people who deserve accommodation, who truly needs this housing, don't get it, I don't think the impact of the government will be felt.
So, low-income earners, you know, people that are homeless, on the streets, under the bridges, should be able to have access to these Renewed Hope Estates and cities. Thank you so much, Oguntunde, for stopping by and for having this conversation with us as the impact of Land Use Act in solving Nigerians' housing deficit. So before we go, do you have anything else to add? One or two things you would want to say?
I think we need to look into the Land Use Act as soon as possible, right, to truly unlock capital, to truly bridge the gap or the housing deficit in Nigeria. And not just that, to generally unlock wealth, right? Land holds huge amount of wealth. Wealth, I mean, practically, I mean, in this current age and time, you start up a company, you make money from it. But beyond that, and what we stick on for life, it's land is capital, right?
Sure.
So for us to unlock that capital, for Nigeria to unlock that wealth, right? There needs to be a revision of Land Use Act to meet our current realities. We cannot just adopt, oh, this country has this now. We need to sit down, look at what are our realities in Nigeria, what are our circumstances, and we need to revise the Land Use Act to fit that. Everybody at this point needs to jettison their selfish interest and come together for the common good of the nation at large, right? So we need to sit down, stakeholders, government, real estate developers, estate surveyors, landowners, tenants, everybody needs to come together, sit, and we need to revise this law to ensure that we get Nigeria to where it needs to be in terms of housing, and also to unlock the huge amount of wealth locked up in land.
So on a lighter note, with the current situation that we have in the country, with high inflation rates, high cost of building materials, like you made a very good example about rents. Every day you wake up, you find out that landlords are increasing.
Yep.
And it's funny that these houses were built, you know, maybe some 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Some of them will tell you they will not renovate their house.
Yes.
Some of them will tell you to bring for 2 years.
Exactly, and then that increment is still there. So in your own view, do you think there's anything as affordable housing in this country?
Well, what I've come to learn now these days is when it comes to affordability, right, it's subjective, right?
I was expecting that.
What is affordable to me, it's subjective. Say you tell me now and say, oh, Ron Joba, there's a property for you that, oh, so it's the property I want you to see for 30 million, 3-bedroom flat, blah, 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 blah. Where? Oh, somewhere in Iju. Oh, that's quite affordable.
Okay.
And then you mention it to somebody else. I'm like, where do you want me to see that amount of money? So it's subjective. But let's not take humanity aside with our subjectivity,
exactly,
right?
yeah.
Honestly, except we have mass housing, right? Mass housing is the only thing that can bring down the prices or the cost of rent.
How can the government be able to achieve the mass housing at this current point that we are in the country?
Well, it's not a one-line answer, right?
Okay.
It's different things who fit into different things. Maybe, for example, custom duties, cost of cement, cost of other materials, they need to come down, right? For example, and that is when yourself and myself can gather our 500 naira, 1,000 naira, and say, okay, maybe myself and yourself can go into a partnership with a real estate development company. Oh, we have a land in Edu, we don't have money to build. I mean, I've seen a lot of that these days, right? But maybe we need more of that. Maybe one, we need mass housing.